ask yourself, what purpose will this podcast serve for you as the creator? Usually it falls into 4 categories: trust and credibility, a high-value networking tool, lead generator, and 4th is a place to share stories that are meaningful to you.
This is Unknown to Known, an on-cam ready presentation. I'm Jamie Maglietta. Thanks so much for watching or listening wherever you are. If these conversations are adding value to your world, I hope you'll subscribe to the channel or give us a follow on your podcast platform of choice. Plus, we love reviews, so do leave us a 5-star review. We appreciate it. Now, 584 people worldwide are listening to podcasts, and yet most professionals still haven't claimed their space in this medium. Why? That's exactly what we're going to get into today. My guest is Allison Hare. She's a broadcasting graduate, former 23-year corporate sales executive, and the creator of The Reinvention Room. The Reinvention Room was renamed to Culture Changers and is a 1.5 globally ranked podcast with nearly 1 million downloads and incredible guests, including myself, guys. You got to check it out. Her podcast is also on YouTube, so be sure to go over there if you're on the YouTube platform and give her a follow. Allison and I have known each other for quite a while. She left her corporate career in 2022 to go all in on podcasting, and now she helps others do the same as a podcast strategist and coach. You can find her at AllisonHare.com. There'll be a link in the description. She's also on Instagram. Today, we're talking about the evolution of podcasting, why YouTube and audio are where professionals need to be right now to attract clients, build authority, and become bookable. Plus, what it actually takes to show up consistently and become known. Here's my conversation with Allison Hare. Allison, I am so glad you could be here. I already told everybody a little bit about your corporate background, what you're doing now, the name change of your podcast, but why don't you tell us a little bit about, what you're up to, where you're working? You're working from home, you've got kids. Give us a little bit more about Allison.
I'm doing all of it. My background is in corporate sales. So I worked for Salesforce, DocuSign, ADP for like 20-something years. So always been super ambitious. But my education background is in broadcasting. I have a degree in broadcasting. And I had launched my podcast in 2019 when I was working in corporate. And essentially I was recording and doing the podcast nights and weekends, sometimes lunches, where I would go in like literally a phone booth in my corporate office and record a podcast interview, and just made it work. I was working 60 hours a week. When I launched my podcast, it is now a globally ranked award-winning show. It's something I'm really proud of. I've interviewed people like you, like Seth Godin and Jesse Itzler and Mariel Hemingway. And just, if you know who they are, they're big deals in their own circles. But almost as long as I have been podcasting myself, I've been helping people launch and grow their show. And I've always done it kind of undercover. And so I had left the corporate world in 2022. I left on purpose, without a plan. I don't recommend this approach. I was profoundly burned out. And at 47, I was starting over from scratch and had no idea what I was going to do, how I was going to make money. We are a 2-income family. And I took a really big income away and went down this track of coaching and entrepreneurship. And as you know, how we met through Brand Builders Group. I spent a few years in the personal brand strategy world, first as a client and then supporting them on their sales team and their podcasting community. And then in March of last year, I went all in on podcast strategy. It just kept coming up again and again and again. And last year, I worked on 24 shows. Probably actually way more than that, but 24 shows that I was working on long term with people. And it's been such an incredible ride of balancing, working from home, having 2 kids, figuring out what it means to run a business and make it into a business and not a hobby, where I literally treated it like a hobby because I had to. It
Mhm.
was something I would just do on the side, and then, the door kept knocking and knocking.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely relate. I mean, for those that are tuning in and listening, thank you so much for listening and being a part of this. And if you can relate, I would love to hear from you. Reach out to us. We're both on Instagram. Find us. We'll have links in the description. I started podcasting undercover while I was at CNN. My husband and I started originally, we bought like these ATR microphones and we were going to have a couple show about finances and following the Dave Ramsey's plan. And we're sing like I sing and he plays guitar. So we were like, oh, we can make our own music. It'd be
Oh, how
fun.
fun.
And it was before COVID. I wish we had, because then we would have had that project. And then it turned into this it's called Spot of Mine, where I would go to different places I loved and try to capture the audio. And no matter what audio equipment I got, it just sounded horrible. And I remember seeing, the audio podcast though pop up on my, Alexa or on YouTube or something. And I was like, oh my gosh, like it's happening. It was just that cool feeling. And it was undercover. Our names were never attached. So when I left CNN, I started a podcast called What Do You Do Exactly? And it was conversations with people I had started to have while I was in grad school. It's like, hey, if I'm going to have these conversations on LinkedIn about their careers and how they pivoted out of the newsroom, I might as well turn them into a show that can help more people, because at the time there were a ton of media layoffs. So navigating podcasting has been a long time for us both. And, while she has a very nice, well known show, I don't, right? So becoming known within a podcasting space can take time. It takes hustle. It takes a lot of work. And we understand, like, you have a lot going on, as we do too. It's all about trying to fit it in, figure it out, and make sure you know what your why is, like why you need a podcast and how that could help you long term. When you came to podcasting for you, what was your initial why?
I started my podcast in a time of political unrest.
Mm,
I was a little over 40. And at the time, I had a lot of stuff that was going on and experiencing personally and in the political realm as well. My podcast is not a political podcast. It never was, but it was born of political frustration and, dealing with things in, maternal health care, specifically around the births of my children and the care that was given. One was like devastating, and the other one was miraculous. And births of those two, and kind of experiencing at the same time I was volunteering at an inner city school near me, and I was looking at literally like systemic racism and oppression and working with kids that were so amazing, but like discarded by society. Where this school was really, really, really pouring into them. But I started to see all of this inequities in so many different realms, whether it was healthcare, the political place, education. And I'm thinking, wow, if I'm learning all of this, what would it be like if, I mean, voting once every 2 years isn't enough. It's nowhere near enough, as you and I both know. But having some kind of platform, what would happen if I were to create conversation or create a community that if people knew what I was learning in real time and we're learning that at the same time, then we could activate together. And so at the time, I had gotten kind of a random promotional email from somebody that I trusted about a podcast workshop. And I didn't even look at the price. I just said yes. And I had no idea what I was going to podcast about, what it would be about. Is somebody who doesn't fit in a box and probably never will,
mhm,
there is challenge. And I think a lot of people come to me where they are multi hyphenate, they're multi talented, they're um, multi gifted in a lot of ways and
mhm,
don't feel like they fit in a box. And when we talk about personal branding, you don't have to, but usually there is a through line. Usually there is a mission that can go and span across many, many different facets of who you are.
Mhm.
And so I launched the podcast and it just kind of took off from there.
While you spoke, I thought of my friend Anushay. Do you know Anushay, the author of the book The Pain Gap? She also now has a podcast called The
I
Pain
don't.
Gap. I think you two need to connect. She could be a great resource or guest. But yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons why people listening may be wanting a podcast. One thing may be because they've heard my episode with a literary agent or someone who is looking for books to turn into films or a TV producer, and they're all saying the same thing. In order to be bookable, to be truly bookable, to get that book deal, to land that film, to have the news producer want to book you on their show, is you need to have an online presence, some engagement, and the academic background and true lived experiences to really stand out as a unique voice, as a true thought leader. And if you are someone listening and you're thinking, okay, I am that true thought leader, I need to be putting myself out there, but I want more than social media, long form content is the way to go. You should always prioritize, in my opinion, long form content, be it a newsletter, YouTube, podcast, or both. Um, so where do you stand with long form social media when you're guiding people? Is your approach usually the same thing? Like, if do you push them toward podcast, or are you kind of like, let me see who you are before I say this is a good fit for you?
Well, it definitely is objective. It's conditional based on where they
Mhm,
are. I think the trifecta is just what you said: podcast plus newsletter plus email list. Those three things are really a force to be reckoned with because you own it. You own those properties as well, and they are a lifeline. I think when it comes to long form content, there are some people that just want to write. They
mhm,
just want to write. That's where they feel so expressed. They don't want to have a podcast, but people tell them they need it. In that case, maybe it makes sense to start on Substack. And if you want to dip your toe into the video aspect of it later, but like, feel really confident in whatever modality is lighting you up, and then you can add on. But generally speaking, the long form content, I completely agree, because the people generally that I work with are people that are really busy, and
mhm,
what they're focused on is they're told to focus on, you got to be on all the social media platforms. You need to post every day. You need to hook them in 3 seconds. And you're trying to fit in, your brilliance and be funny and be clever and be catchy in 7-second reels. It's a lot of pressure, and people are spending a lot of time and effort in that. Where you can do long form content. And there's so many tools out there that allow you to cut it up and repurpose that. So it makes it easier if you're going to have the time to like build things out and leverage the tools that are available to kind of cut it up for you, and you can put the bells and whistles on it if you
yeah,
want to. But I think the benefit is that when like, you're not going to sell a $20,000 product from a 7-second reel. People need to know you and like you and trust you, and that happens over time. However, what I
mhm,
have seen and I have experienced is that you can have a tight 30-minute podcast interview where you deliver so much value. People literally get to experience what it's like to work with you. They get to experience, and identify, like, I align with her values. I get her. She has changed my mind about something. And you can sell your offer off of one podcast episode. And I've seen it again and again and again. That isn't always the norm, and I want to be clear, if because again, I typically work with founders that are incorporating their business into their podcast, but built on their thought leadership. We want it engaging. We want it entertaining. That is how you change people's mind, is through entertainment. But I want to be clear that you don't just all of a sudden have a podcast and you're blown away with leads. It really is kind of a middle of the funnel kind of thing.
mhm,
But the trust and credibility that is built over time, I mean, I'll listen to your podcast, Jamie, and I'm on a walk, or I'm on a commute, or I'm doing the dishes, or I'm in the bathroom putting on my makeup. Like, you become a companion to me and your listeners. You start to become part of their routines, which is such a gift. And it's
Mm.
such an intimate place to create, what starts out as parasocial relationships. But when you build engagement into the structure and the format of your podcast,
Mhm.
then all bets are off. Then you're starting to have a bidirectional communication. And that's generally what I do.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. Like, so you become part of their routine. I think that's a really nice standout point. A lot of the shows I listen to are news shows, people telling me what I missed because I'm not reading as often. I'm not hooked on cable anymore. And for me, those consume anytime I can listen to a podcast. So I don't really build many relationships with podcasters, right? So I think you bring up a really good point for people who are thinking about adding a podcast to their plate and saying, "Hey, I would think I'm ready. I want to do this. I want to connect with my audience and I want to maybe sell my offers to them through my podcast," because that can be a really good thing for them to try. It is a lot of work. A lot of people don't realize that. I just priced out a podcast for a potential client and she wants the producers, the writers, the editors. When you start thinking about having a writer per show doing research on the guest, a host that you're paying, editors in addition to the resources to build it out, it can get very expensive. So going into a podcast, you really need to be thinking, okay, what can I afford right now? Don't let other people's podcasts of high-end production make you think you shouldn't have one or can't have one. You can do one with a Riverside platform like this. You can start on Zoom. I don't recommend it, but people do. And you can hire a team through Fiverr or something to just get you going. But you really need to have a strategic business plan in place before you launch a podcast because you don't want to just if you're trying to tie it to your business, what do you want to add on like the business planning of a podcast?
There's a lot, actually.
There
I would
is.
say, yeah, I would say that it can be much simpler
Mhm.
to, yes, it is work, right? It is work. And depending on your resources and your bandwidth, you can outsource. Most people I work with aren't looking for the NPR level sound design and a full production team. We tend to work lean and mean. And in most cases, it doesn't need all of the bells and whistles of that. And certainly you can do from a Fiverr kind of thing, or do it yourself, or hire a company like Scotch Media or somebody that can do the post production pretty affordably. I think part of it is identifying how much time do you have to allocate to this.
Mhm.
Generally speaking, if you have a weekly podcast of a normal length, some people can do 5-minute podcasts. Some people do 5-minute podcasts every day or once a week, or, it can be all different ranges depending on what are you trying to do? What is the goal and the purpose of you having a podcast?
Mhm.
Where from a time perspective, I want to tackle it in two ways. One way is that if it feels very daunting of like, oh my God, I don't have time, they feel
Mhm.
like if they start a podcast, that means they are committed forever and ever. Amen.
Mhm.
And that isn't always the way. In some cases, it's much more manageable. And that's kind of the work that I do, that I work with really busy founders that are like, I can't not do this, but I have to figure out a way. So how can we look at the calendar and essentially reallocate? Because usually what happens is there are so many competing priorities that in your mind, they're all like on level 10. And then when we start to peel back of like, okay, if we're going to focus on long form, we can repurpose some of that time that you're spending on maybe short form, and then we get to shift things around where you do have spaciousness to be able to do it. On one hand, you can think about, do you want to do it in seasons or do a limited series where you do 12 episodes and then you're done, right? It gives you a little bit of a bank. It allows you to send clients or potential clients or listeners to a bank. essentially of content that you have that can help people with trust and credibility and learning from you and all of that. Some people can work in seasons. Some people work where they take the summers off or they take the holidays off, and that works too. Adam Grant, who does the Work Life podcast, he does 10 episodes a year. That's it. I mean, certainly they're heavily researched. He's a busy guy as well, but they're 10 episodes, so there are no hard and fast rules as much as what can be counted on. I think when it comes to time per week, what I see is typical for like a weekly podcast is if you can allocate 2 to 4 hours a week, then you can run a podcast depending on what that is. And again, if you have resources and bandwidth, that time can come down if you want a team to support you. Where for some people, they're like, I don't want to think about it. I just want to show up at the mic, do my thing, and get back to work. And you can
Mhm.
do that too. But you do need to
Mhm.
plan in the beginning and make sure those foundational pieces are dialed in so that you're not like scrambling for content.
Yes. Yes. So true. And, just some of the stats to support the point, Omniscient Digital said about 60% of podcast listeners have purchased a product or service after hearing it mentioned in an episode, making
Yeah.
podcasts one of the highest converting media formats. So if you're thinking about it and you're like, oh, I kind of want a podcast, reach out to Allison. She can help you brainstorm. But like the average guest to client conversion rate on a B2B podcast is 10%. One company converted 48% of strategically selected podcast guests from target accounts into pipeline opportunities. So there's a lot of data out there. Do some research. The other thing I'm just going to get us into while I'm spitting out some facts, YouTube now has over 1 billion podcast viewers a month. That's a billion with a B, guys. Spotify has 120 million. And so for someone who has been audio only, there may be some of you listening, you may want to be thinking about turning on your camera, taking the leap into video, because that data on YouTube really screams people want some visuals. And YouTube is the most watched streaming platform in households. So there's a lot of data there to really support turning on the camera. How has it been with your clients, getting them to rethink what a podcast is today?
I think the you're absolutely right. YouTube is by far the number one platform of how people consume podcasts. And the thing about YouTube is you're going to grow faster on YouTube. It's easier to grow faster on YouTube because YouTube is literally a search engine. Whereas in the audio platform, from a searchability and discoverability perspective, it really is like the titles, not
Mm,
the episode description and all the tags and all that stuff. It is more limited in audio as of right now. They are beefing that part up, and so
mhm,
people are venturing into audio and video. What they're finding is that something like 60% of people are not only watching on YouTube, but they're also listening. And so Apple Podcasts just added a video component.
mhm.
And essentially, what that means is you can start watching it on your smart TV, which is how most people consume podcasts. Is well, it's on in the background in their smart TV.
Yes.
Let's say they're leaving the house and they jump in the car and they pick right up where they left off. And so there is a combination of audio video. There are some people that just are never going to be comfortable
Mhm,
with video, and audio is not going away. It doesn't mean that you can't grow. It doesn't mean that your show can't be a bona fide hit. And even the daily podcast, they are starting to venture into the daily has been, ranking in the top five forever. The daily news podcast, it is an audio format. They are starting to venture into the video thing, but they're not quite sure how they do it because they have literally created a new form of how to consume news through the audio because it is so editorial. It is about storytelling. And I think that really is it, the theater of the mind, that when you can capture somebody from an audio perspective, video is much easier, right? Because that you can see it, you can see the
mhm,
visuals. But the audio piece, that when you get really good at that and making it engaging, lights out, like that is
mhm.
just a chef's kiss. of storytelling and editorial, and that is how people get bound to you. That's how people find you, and there is people really it is such an intimate medium where people really really feel connected to you. I was walking in my neighborhood and I heard somebody stop me and they said, Allison. And I turned around. I didn't recognize her at all. And she's like, I'm sorry to stop you. And I was like, what is your name? And she told me, and I was like, oh, I think I met you years ago at whatever. She's like, yeah, I met her once, like years and years ago. She said, I just want to thank you for your podcast. She said,
Aw.
it has made such a difference for me. And I hired one of the guests that you've had on, and it has completely changed my life. And I just want to thank you. And there are just so many people out there that I will never, ever know. Most people that listen to your podcast, you will most likely never hear from. But the ones that you do, they are like bought and sold, right? That may not sound right, but they are like they're your fans, right?
Yeah.
They're your super fans, and when it comes from a business perspective, you don't have to sell them. They already know. You're not having to prove that you are
Mhm.
trustworthy enough to do business with. They're ready to go. And so there are just so many amazing benefits, audio or video. But from a storytelling perspective, when you can nail audio, YouTube is much easier.
Yeah, I would agree. Audio, when I was producing the Reliable Sources podcast, it was audio only. And then we would turn the show, like the TV show, into a podcast. Um, and it was always audio. And, audio really is important in the storytelling to lead people in and out of breaks when you have them and you have them is important. So if you're thinking about your structure to our listeners, and also, for me, when I'm listening to my regular podcasts, it's hard for me to make time to listen to things daily. So mine's more of when I'm in the car, if I'm taking a long trip, and it's always the first one I always turn to is Status. I don't know if you've heard of Status, but
Uh-uh.
Status,
What is
it's a
status?
podcast. It is run by Oliver Darcy, a former boss at CNN. So he has this great media insider podcast. The other one that I love is Scalable. Scalable is by a former well, she basically was covering social media, marketing, advertising. The two anchors of this podcast were. So it's become a creator podcast. It's called Scalable, but I already know, like, and trust these people from their print. So what I'm saying is, for me as a listener, I'm already building that trust reading, knowing their journalistic backgrounds because that's what I get drawn to. And so that might be if you're listening and you're trying to find a way to build out your podcast and you're trying to figure out, well, how do I build know, like, and trust to gain listeners? You may want to start that newsletter first or posting on LinkedIn first to start getting people engaged with your thought leadership. Because for me, that's how I got drawn to these specific podcasts. What are maybe two podcasts that you like listening to on maybe a weekly basis or a daily?
I listen to so many podcasts. Do you mean like trash podcasts or
Whatever
ones
you
for
love.
like
Like, what do you
information
love?
business? I think Sounds Like a Cult is one of the funniest and most clever and smartest podcasts
Mhm.
out there. It is one of the hosts is Amanda Montell, and she just is so intelligent and
Mhm.
so smart. And it's a lighthearted view on cults. I love it. I think it's so great. I I'm trying to think because there are I mean, they're all like cold podcasts. A Little
But
Bit
that's
Culty
fine,
is
like,
incredible. A Little
you
Bit
but that
Culty
that
is a
brings up a
really
great
great,
point of niches, right?
great
So
podcast as well.
yeah, it's like you need to have a niche. So it's good to have a niche because then you're gonna find people like Allison who are like, "Oh, I love, this culty podcast." For me, it's usually journalistic. I get drawn to
Yeah.
media, like the Reuters Institute, their podcast, or, someone else who's, just reporting on a long, extensive trial. Like Rotten Mango is a very creative podcast. I highly recommend it. I did a review on that podcast and I had over 30, I think it's now at 30,000 views on a reel.
Wow.
On a
I have to
reel.
listen to that
The
one.
audience of that podcast is so dedicated. It's worth listening to for you guys looking to branch
Diabolical
out.
Lies is another great
What
one
is it
too.
called?
Diabolical Lies.
No, I'll have to check that one out. Yeah.
Conspirituality is really interesting. These are all like
Mhm.
the
But the
underbelly of cults, but
Yeah, they are.
there
As
are,
you
I
know.
mean, I'll listen to business podcasts and
Mhm.
there are a lot of I listen to so many and a lot of them are my clients as well. Not diabolical, not the ones that I've told you about, but I listen to a lot of my clients' podcasts as well and checking in on them
Mhm.
and seeing how they're growing. And a lot of them are more niche. And you're right. I think when you create a community. And I think that is what people, I think that is like the next frontier of podcasting is that, yes, when you think about it, it's a one way medium, right? But
Mhm.
how do you make it bidirectional? And a lot of that is moving more towards live events and communities. When you think of Diary of a CEO, which
Mhm.
is another podcast I love as well. But Diary of a CEO is so fascinating how he interviews. But he has rented out movie theaters across the world where they have sold out um, people going there. They might have one of the guests that he has on there doing a Q&A, but people are like collaborating with each other. They're networking. These are all fans of the podcast, so they have a common
Mhm.
interest. And it's interesting that they're renting out movie theaters to play the video of Diary of a CEO, not to even
Not even a
watch it
live
be recorded
podcast.
live.
Yep.
It is
Mhm.
just watching a
Mhm.
video of it. So I think there is more innovation and more explosion right now around the capabilities of what a podcast can do to connect people. And I think that
Yeah.
is truly the next frontier of it.
Yeah, the in real life podcast moments are helping build brands. I worked on a live podcast and I think we had over 250 people show up for the live podcast interview. And it was a massive event. Like we made it a branding event. Seriously, there were so many photo opportunities and camera crews and opportunities to network. And when you have that environment, you're building more loyal fans, you're building more listeners, you're potentially even getting them to want to read your newsletter because now you're in real life. Megyn Kelly just did a tour going around the country hosting her conversations on huge stages. The podcasting space can be whatever you can make it, but I will say on Diary of a CEO, my husband does not listen to podcasts. He will watch Diary of a CEO because the clips somehow make it into his social media feed.
Yeah.
And the way they're crafted, he gets hooked in and then he turns on the show and he listens, well, more watches it because it's on YouTube. He watches it on YouTube while he folds his laundry. And
Yeah.
that's the only show I've ever seen him really listen to, but he is one of those people that was hooked from a clip on social. So when people are saying, "Oh, well, I don't really have the time or the bandwidth to cut clips," cut the clips. Cut as many as you can per an episode. What is your thoughts on that?
I think there are two things. So yes,
Mhm.
I think the clips are helpful. I think it all comes down to packaging though, because
Mhm.
nobody cares that you have a new episode. So if you buy a template that says new episode, nobody
Mhm.
cares. And nobody cares really who your guest is, where you might have a picture of your guest in your face and they're in these little discs and you can't really read it. What people care about is what is the payoff? What is the question that is being answered by this episode? What is the problem that you might be struggling with or curiosity that you may be struggling with? And identifying what those are. Jamie, you talk a lot about hooks, and the hooks are everything with these. And um, because, again, Opus Clips and Riverside, and there are a lot of platforms out there that make it really, really easy to cut clips and figure out from a virality perspective, it's much easier to find what is going to convert. But I think the most important thing is how do you package it in a way that is going, because generally speaking, people don't like close the Instagram app and open a podcast app and just start listening. It usually doesn't happen that way. They may put a marker in it or they may open it and queue it up for later. I think that is what all the data shows that people are doing, but people aren't usually leaving the platform to automatically listen to your show. But getting enough curiosity, my husband is the same exact way as your husband. He does not listen to podcasts. He's not an audio guy unless I force him when we're in the car. um, but he watches things on his smart TV while he's cooking or doing stuff, around the house. And that's how he is learning and how he is consuming that. And I find that I think what's great about podcasts in general is that they're versatile enough that you can consume them in a lot of different
Mhm.
ways. And sometimes it's only the clips, but the clips are going to draw you into that person as a creator, even if you're not listening to the full episode. And that's what we see happens often with Diary of a CEO and a lot of these big shows where
Mm.
the clips are so compelling, but the payoff is they get all the clicks and commentary and people are talking about it. And then those people are like, well, I got to listen to this. So it does drive numbers.
Yeah, there's a conversation I had with another podcaster, Gerald, and we talked about
Our
growth
boy
on
Gerald Davis.
YouTube. Yep, Gerald Davis. So, guys, if you want to listen to that podcast, we do go into growth, clips. And then I have another with Stephen Robles, who was the face of Riverside. And we talk about how to strategically position yourself on YouTube. So, if you're thinking about expanding your brand, adding a podcast, adding the visual element of YouTube, definitely listen to those episodes after you listen to this. With this show being called Unknown to Known, it's really important that I ask, in your experience, what do you think actually helps move the needle for someone becoming going from invisible to being the person everyone really wants to listen to or hear?
This may ruffle some feathers, but having a clear lane that is yours to own um, is the most important thing. And what I mean by that is that if you hug the middle, meaning have no opinion about anything, if everything is neutral, your show becomes forgettable. That doesn't mean that you have to become Andrew Tate and be super offensive and, kind of throw bombs at people and do that. But having an opinion, and we all have opinions, but I think overcoming the fear of like, if I say this, am I going to offend somebody? But if it is a truth for you and it can move a conversation forward, it may be worth saying. And you can always say it in a way that is respectful and dignified and not without dunking people unless that's your deal. Maybe it is. Maybe that is your deal and that's something too. But if it is not, because most of the time I think when I work with people, these are people that are confident, they're accomplished, but when it comes to sharing their like how they really feel, people will dig their heels in a little bit because they may not have expressed themselves in that way. But I'm telling you, the more you are your authentic self, the more people connect with you. And believe it or not, most of my time is not spent teaching people on how to podcast. It's how to welcome people home to themselves. Because
Mm.
what feels natural is you're listening to Mel Robbins or Jay Shetty or Stephen Bartlett or Jamie Maglietta and saying, well, I want to sound like that. And so there is a natural instinct to kind of mimic what you hear and what sounds good to you. But I'm almost undoing that of like, no, 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 no. What is it that you really think? Or even just
Yeah.
having an opinion about cults or, for me, I have a stupid obsession with cults and trad wives, and I could talk about it forever. And, you can be on whatever side of the fence with it. But I think people's idiosyncrasies and things that they love are what we really, really embrace in my world and what I always recommend. People kind of double down on what makes them quirky or stand out. And it doesn't mean you have to be quirky, but it does mean having a lane to
Mhm.
choose, and that helps define you and it helps connect you.
Yeah, I
Can I give
truly
you an
agree with that.
example real fast?
Yeah.
So I was at this podcast conference many years ago, and there was a woman there, and she lived in Virginia, and she had this unusual affinity for game shows in the UK. And she had such an affinity for UK game shows. She created a podcast about it, a whole podcast about game shows in a totally different country than hers.
Mm.
And do you think that show was like huge?
It was massive.
Well, of course it wasn't huge, but was it like, did she have a rabid following? She sure did. And
See, it's
so
incredible.
sometimes people don't need, like, what does it mean to be known? It doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a zillion followers, but
Mhm,
you do want people activated. And maybe that activation is sharing it with a friend or DMing you or asking to work with you or maybe saying, Jamie, I didn't agree with that. I wanted to talk more
mhm,
about it. All of those engagement are really where I measure that I'm less interested in downloads and views where you might have a lot more stake in it than I am engagement. Are you hearing from people? Are they sharing it? Are they furthering the mission?
mhm.
Are you having is it a bidirectional relationship that you
Yeah.
have set up from a structural perspective?
No, it's so important. It's all good points to bring up. The other thing that we need to make sure we weave in as many people who listen to listen to podcasts are high income earners, people who want to make the most out of
That's right.
their careers, their lives. And some of them may be listening and thinking, I should appear on podcasts. How do I get to appear as a guest? What makes me bookable? What helps someone stand out to you as a good guest?
Having a clear point of view once again
Yeah.
and making sure that I think people really um people want to be taken on a journey, and usually the easiest and fastest way to do it and to teach people is through storytelling. And so having relevant stories that are clear, that move people towards a direction helps. And again, having a clear point of view and having an opportunity for them to connect with you. So when you go be a guest on other people's podcasts, it's really important to have a way to connect with you that is more than, hey, follow me on the socials. Because if you follow them on socials, you don't know they're there, and that's a problem. If you have, like, again, the most valuable real estate that you can have is somebody's email address. So if you have a lead magnet or an email newsletter or some way that people can register, connect with you, or even if it is DM me, um, with something very specific, that helps build the relationship. But again, having a compelling story, telling stories, being clear on your offer and the lane that you stand in will always have you stand out as somebody to become known for.
No, that's a really good point. And guys, if you're listening and you're still like, I think I really want to do a podcast, have a plan in place because half of podcasts fail to publish beyond 3 episodes. That used to be 10. It's getting shorter and shorter. People just give up. You really need a plan in place. I've heard some people, they will batch record almost 2 weeks, like a whole year of episodes. That to me sounds like, wow, so much work. Um,
It's a different muscle.
it's a different muscle, but test it out. I've been testing out myself, and I think it really does help you figure out who your audience is if you don't know, and trying to tap into the best ways that you like to create content. As I've been on my own journey, what I'm finding I enjoy most is finding people who posted on social and landed press. Those are my ideal guests, because they continue to support what I'm on a mission to tell people about. Like, post, because you can get press. And this weekend, I was out to Mom 2.0 and I met so many people who were like, "Oh yeah, I posted and wound up getting quoted in this article," or "Yeah, I did a reel on this, and Washington Post asked me if I would write something on it." And I'm like, "What?" It happens, guys. The more you share your point of view online, the more of a chance you're going to be able to potentially gain more press. So that's my ideal right now. Merging into that, becoming that as my focus. I feel like I'll still include, conversations like this because we still have to be able to help people, in my opinion, like on that journey of unknown to known. And even those people who post to press aren't becoming known suddenly. But I spoke with one this weekend who 2 years ago, she posted about how her trend that she created landed her on Tamron Hall. She tells me this weekend the Tamron Hall show wound up helping her secure her agent, helping her gain all these brand deals, and then allowed her to leave her job. So you never know. And showing up online in any way you can help you. I have another guest on, Allison. Her name's Latasha James. She said that her YouTube has now launched a speaking career because people go to her YouTube, they see her point of view, and they're like, I would love you to do a workshop on this topic for us. So, again, if you are thinking you have what it takes, definitely reach out to Allison. There'll be some links in the description so you guys can connect and start thinking about what your podcast could really be. Do some research. What are other people podcasting about? So before we go, are there any, final tips or points that you want to make sure you bring up before we wrap?
Yeah, I so appreciate that. I think the most important part is something I call the 4 Ps of podcasting. So when you're thinking of kind of dialing in the foundational basics, ask yourself, what purpose will this podcast serve for you as the creator? Usually it falls into 4 categories. It doesn't mean that it is one or the other. It's just who's in the driver's seat.
Hmm.
Trust and credibility is one. A high value networking tool is 2. Lead generator is 3. And fourth is a place to share stories that are meaningful to you. So the first question is, what purpose will a podcast serve for you as the creator? The second one is, who is your listener? And I like to choose one. Who is your primary listener? Who is that person? Who is going to get the most out of it? The third thing is, what is the premise? So that's what most people think. What's your podcast about? And essentially, it's what is your unique lane? What is the unique perspective that you get to bring to the market? And the fourth thing is, what is the promise? And the promise is, what is the payoff that people get, or like packaged every time they listen to your show? And so I'll give you an example. I have a client, Brian Green, and his podcast is called The Commercial Break. It's one of the biggest comedy podcasts in the world. And the promise that he and his partner, Chrissy, serve is they want you as the listener to laugh out loud at least once, but not like
Hmm.
think to yourself, "Oh, that's funny." But like you're going to spit soda out your nose. It's so funny
Hmm.
at least once. Because if that happens, people are coming back, right? You've made them feel something. So maybe for you that might be a framework or some kind of actionable takeaway. Maybe a promise that's kind of like a snack that you get to share or you get to consume yourself that makes your life a little bit better. And maybe it is like news you can use. I know that you work with a lot of news people. Something you didn't know this morning
Hmm.
that is something you can share and take out into the world. So those 4 things I think are really, really important to dial in. Jamie is right that most people don't make it past episode 10, but the way that you do that, if you can dial in those 4 things and really have a strong foundation of why you're doing it in the first place, then you get to have the longevity because when it's in alignment with who you are, it becomes so much easier than trying to like triangulate. Well, what hasn't been done before? What could I do? Like you want it to like resonate in your bones. And so I would listen to your bones on it. And a lot of times you can figure out a way to turn it into a very compelling, engaging show that is aligned with your brand and your reputation and whatever that looks like.
Yeah. And, again, there's a lot of ways to do it. Right now, as you're thinking through, like, those are some really good questions to ask yourself. I'm really glad we could be together today and share some tips for people. And thank you so much for being here, Allison.
Thank you so much, Jamie. You are such a light.
Aw, thank you. Thank you for being here.